What happens when one of the world's most famous royals sits down for what should be a straightforward interview and instead unleashes a verbal assault so shocking that America's most trusted journalist has no choice but to end the conversation on the spot? It only took 38 seconds of one careless comment for Prince Harry to go from composed guest to being escorted off the set. Before we dive into every jaw-dropping detail, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're pulling back the curtain on royalty's dark side. We expose entitled celebrities and their shocking behavior the cameras never showed you. We've got the raw footage they don't want you to see, and you won't want to miss a single reveal. Drop your thoughts in the comments about this outrageous behavior. Now, let's get into exactly what happened. The studio lights were blazing hot that evening, casting sharp shadows across the iconic 60 Minutes set. Anderson Cooper sat in his chair, papers arranged neatly on the desk before him, his expression calm and professional as always. Across from him, Prince Harry adjusted his microphone, looking somewhat relaxed but with a hint of tension in his jaw. The cameras rolled, the crew stood silent, and millions of viewers at home settled in to watch what they assumed would be another polished, carefully orchestrated interview. Anderson opened with his trademark smoothness. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us tonight. I know this has been a difficult time for you and your family. Let's start with something straightforward. Can you tell our audience what you hope people understand about your recent decisions?" Harry nodded slowly, his eyes meeting Anderson's with surprising intensity. "Well, Anderson, I think what people need to understand is that everything I've done has been to protect my family. That's always been my priority. The press, the institutions, they don't see us as real people. They see us as products, as things to be consumed." Anderson leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but probing. "That's a serious accusation. Can you elaborate on what you mean by institutions treating you as products?" For a moment, Harry seemed to consider his words carefully, but then something shifted in his expression. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. "You know what, Anderson? I'm tired of elaborating. I'm tired of explaining myself to people who will never understand what it's like. You sit here in your comfortable chair, asking me questions like you have any idea what my life is like. Do you know what it's like to have every single moment of your existence scrutinized? Do you?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees. Anderson blinked, clearly taken aback by the sudden hostility. "I'm simply trying to give you an opportunity to share your perspective," he said calmly. "That's what we do here. We have conversations." Harry let out a short, bitter laugh. "Conversations? Is that what you call this? This is an interrogation. You journalists are all the same. You pretend to care, you pretend to be on our side, but really, you're just looking for the next headline, the next controversy, the next way to twist my words and make me look like the villain." Anderson's expression remained composed, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, disappointment, perhaps, or concern. "I can assure you, that's not my intention at all. I'm here to listen to your story, but I do have to ask questions. That's the nature of an interview." "The nature of an interview?" Harry repeated mockingly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How noble of you. Tell me, Anderson, how much are you getting paid for this? How much is this network making off of my pain? Because, let's be honest, that's what this is really about. Ratings? Money? You don't actually care about me or my family, you just want the exclusive." The crew members exchanged uncomfortable glances. One camera operator shifted nervously. Anderson straightened in his chair, his voice still measured but with a new edge of firmness. "I think you're projecting some frustrations that don't belong in this room. I've built my career on integrity and honest reporting. I've interviewed presidents, activists, survivors of unimaginable trauma, and I've treated every single person with respect. I'm offering you that same respect right now." Harry's face flushed red. "Respect? You want to talk about respect? Where was the respect when your colleagues camped outside my home? Where was the respect when they printed lies about my wife? Where was the respect when they drove my mother to her death?" Anderson's expression softened. "I understand you're in pain. I understand you've been through trauma, but I'm not responsible for what other journalists have done. I'm not your enemy." "Aren't you, though?" Harry shot back, his voice rising. "You're all part of the same machine, the same system that destroys lives for profit. You sit there with your concerned face and your gentle questions, but you're no different from the rest of them. You're a vulture in a nice suit." There was a stunned silence in the studio. Anderson took a slow, deep breath. His hands remained folded calmly on the desk, but his jaw was tight. I've been called many things in my career, he said quietly, but never that. I think we need to take a moment here. Take a moment? Harry's voice was incredulous now, almost wild. Why? So you can regroup? So you can figure out how to salvage this interview? I'm done taking moments. I'm done playing nice. I'm done pretending like any of this matters. Anderson nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. I think what matters right now is recognizing that this conversation has taken a turn that isn't productive for either of us. I came here in good faith, prepared to have an honest discussion, but what's happening right now isn't a discussion, it's something else entirely. Oh, here we go, Harry said, throwing his hands up. The high road, the moral superiority. You can't handle the truth, so you're going to shut me down. Typical. Absolutely typical. Anderson's voice was firm now, all traces of his earlier gentleness gone. I'm not shutting you down. I'm acknowledging reality. You came here angry, and instead of using this platform to share your genuine perspective, you've chosen to attack me personally. That's not journalism. That's not even conversation. It's just hostility. Maybe I have a right to be hostile, Harry snapped. Maybe after everything I've been through, I've earned the right to be angry. You don't get to judge me for that. I'm not judging you for being angry, Anderson replied evenly. I'm observing that you're directing that anger at the wrong person. I invited you here. I prepared thoughtful questions. I've been nothing but professional and courteous, and in return, you've insulted me, questioned my integrity, and compared me to the paparazzi who chased your mother. That's not fair, and you know it. Harry's face was now completely red. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Nothing about my life has been fair. Nothing about this situation is fair. And you sitting there acting like you're some kind of saint? Like you're above it all? That's not fair either. Anderson's eyes met Harry's steadily. I never claimed to be above anything. I'm a journalist doing my job, a job I take seriously, a job I've dedicated my life to with the goal of giving people a voice, including you. But I won't sit here and be verbally abused. I won't allow you to project your pain onto me as if I'm responsible for it. Then maybe you shouldn't have invited me here, Harry retorted. Maybe I shouldn't have, Anderson agreed quietly. There was a weight to his words, a finality. He turned slightly, addressing someone off camera. I think we're done here. Harry's eyes widened. Excuse me? We're done when I say we're done. Anderson shook his head. No, we're done when I say we're done. This is my program. This is my set. And I decide when an interview has crossed a line. You've crossed that line. You can't do this, Harry said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and rage. You can't just end the interview. Do you know who I am? And there it was. The moment that would be replayed endlessly, dissected by every media outlet, memed into oblivion. Anderson looked at Harry with an expression that was somehow both sad and resolute. Yes, I know exactly who you are. And right now, you're someone who needs to leave my studio. Harry stood up abruptly, yanking the microphone from his lapel with such force that it clattered to the floor. This is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous. You invited me here under false pretenses. You said this would be a fair conversation. It would have been, Anderson said, still seated, still calm, if you had come here ready to have one. But you didn't. You came here looking for a fight, and I'm not going to give you one. Unbelievable, Harry muttered, pacing now. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly the kind of treatment I've been subjected to my entire life. Someone finally stands up to the media, finally tells the truth about how corrupt and manipulative you all are, and you silence them. You literally silence them. Anderson stood now, matching Harry's gaze. I'm not silencing you. I'm protecting my crew, my program, and frankly, I'm protecting you from yourself. Because if we continue this conversation, you're going to say things you can't take back. Things that will hurt you more than they'll hurt anyone else. Harry laughed harshly. How noble. How very noble of you, Anderson. Protecting me? Is that what you tell yourself? Is that how you sleep at night? I sleep fine, Anderson replied. I sleep knowing I've conducted thousands of interviews with honesty and integrity. I sleep knowing I've given voices to people who desperately needed to be heard. And I'll sleep fine tonight knowing that I gave you every opportunity to share your story and you chose to waste it attacking me instead. There was a long, tense pause. Harry seemed to be struggling for words, his fists clenched at his sides. Finally, he pointed a finger at Anderson. You're going to regret this. When people find out how you treated me, how you kicked me off your show, they're going to see you for what you really are. Anderson's expression didn't change. They'll see the footage. They'll see exactly what happened here. They'll make their own judgments. I'm comfortable with that. Are you? That question hung in the air like smoke. Harry's mouth opened, then closed. He seemed to deflate slightly, the rage giving way to something else. Confusion, perhaps, or the dawning realization of what had just occurred. But he didn't apologize. He didn't soften. Instead, he turned sharply on his heel and strode toward the studio exit. "Your Royal Highness," a producer called out nervously, "we need you to sign some release forms." Harry didn't even turn around. "Have my people contact your people," he called back dismissively. The studio door slammed behind him with a resounding bang that echoed through the cavernous space. Anderson stood alone at his desk, watching the closed door. The crew remained frozen, unsure whether to move or speak. Finally, Anderson picked up Harry's discarded microphone from the floor, examined it briefly, and set it carefully on the desk. He looked at the head camera operator. "Did we get all of that?" he asked quietly. The camera operator nodded, still looking stunned. "Every second." Anderson nodded slowly. "Good. We're gonna need it." One of the producers approached him tentatively. "Anderson, what do we do now? Do we air this? Do we release a statement? This is gonna be huge." Anderson sat back down in his chair, suddenly looking very tired. "We document exactly what happened. We review the footage, we contact our legal team, and then we decide." He paused, running a hand through his silver hair. "But whatever we do it by the book. We do it with integrity, because that's what separates us from the circus." Another producer spoke up. "He called you a vulture. He compared you to the paparazzi. That's incredibly damaging." "It's incredibly hurtful," Anderson corrected, "but damaging only if it's true. And it's not." He looked around at his crew, his expression serious. "I want everyone who was in this room to write down their account of what happened. Every detail you remember, every word that was said. We need a complete record." "Do you think he'll try to spin this?" someone asked. Anderson let out a long breath. "I think he'll try to control the narrative. Yes, that's what people do when they've made a mistake. They try to rewrite history. But we have the tape. We have witnesses. We have the truth." He stood up again, addressing the entire crew. "I know that was difficult to watch. It was difficult to be part of. But I want you all to know that what happened here tonight was not our fault. We extended an invitation. We prepared thoughtful questions. We approached this with professionalism and respect. What happened after that was beyond our control." A young production assistant raised her hand hesitantly. "Anderson, can I ask something? Why did you keep trying? Why didn't you end it sooner?" Anderson considered the question. "Because I hoped he would course correct. I hoped that if I remained calm, if I remained professional, he would realize what he was doing and pull back. I've seen it happen before. People come into interviews carrying heavy burdens, and sometimes they lash out. But usually, if you give them space and patience, they find their way back. He didn't. And after a certain point, continuing would have been irresponsible, not just to me, but to him." "What do you mean?" the assistant asked. "I mean that if I had let him continue down that path, he would have said something truly unforgivable, something that would have damaged him irreparably. And despite what he thinks, despite what he said about me tonight, I don't want that. I don't want anyone to destroy themselves on national television." Anderson picked up his papers, tapping them against the desk to straighten them. "We're journalists, not executioners." The crew began to disperse slowly, murmuring among themselves. Anderson remained at his desk, staring at the empty chair where Harry had sat. A makeup artist approached with a tissue and a bottle of water. "You okay?" she asked softly. Anderson took the water gratefully. "I've been better. But I've been worse too." He took a long drink. "In 25 years of doing this, I've never had an interview end like that. Never." "He was way out of line," the makeup artist said firmly. "Everyone saw it." "Everyone in this room saw it," Anderson agreed. "But the question is, what will everyone else see? How will this story be told?" He shook his head. "And that's what bothers me most. Not what he said about me. I've dealt with worse. But what this represents, the breakdown of civil discourse. The inability to have difficult conversations without them devolving into personal attacks." A senior producer joined them. "Network wants a statement within the hour." Anderson nodded. "Tell them they'll have it, but I need to watch the footage first. I need to see exactly what we captured." They moved to the control room, where technicians were already queuing up the recording. Anderson sat in a rolling chair, his eyes fixed on the monitor as the interview played from the beginning. His initial greeting, Harry's first reasonable response, and then the slow, terrible spiral. The escalating hostility, the accusations, the insults, his own measured responses, his attempts to de-escalate, his final decision to end the interview. When it finished, the room was silent. Finally, Anderson spoke. "He came here wanting this to happen." The senior producer frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look at the progression. He starts reasonable enough, but there's tension from the beginning. And then, at the first slightly probing question, he explodes. This wasn't spontaneous combustion. This was premeditated." Anderson pointed at the screen. He wanted to position himself as the victim. He wanted to create a confrontation so he could claim he was being attacked. "But you weren't attacking him," someone protested. "I know that. You know that. Everyone in this room knows that. But that's not the story he wants to tell. The story he wants to tell is that he came here in good faith, and the big bad media journalist tried to trap him, so he had to defend himself." Anderson leaned back in his chair. "The problem is, the tape doesn't support that narrative. So now we'll see what happens when reality conflicts with the story someone wants to tell. We have to air this," the senior producer said. "We have to show people what really happened." Anderson was quiet for a long moment. "We will, but we do it carefully. We do it with full context. We show the entire exchange, unedited. We don't try to sensationalize it or spin it. We present it as factually as possible and let the viewers make their own judgments." "When?" the producer asked. "Soon, very soon, because if we don't control this story, someone else will. And their version won't include the parts where I tried to keep things civil. Their version won't include the part where he called me a vulture. Their version will be whatever serves their purpose." Anderson stood up. "Get legal on the phone, get publicity ready, and get me a copy of that footage. I need to review it again before we make any final decisions." As the team sprang into action, Anderson walked back onto the now empty set. The lights had been dimmed. The cameras were powered down. The chair where Harry had sat was pushed back at an awkward angle, exactly where he'd left it. Anderson looked at it for a long moment, then quietly pushed it back into its proper position. He sat down in his own chair one more time, looking out at the empty studio. "What a waste," he said quietly to no one. "What an absolute waste." Because that's what it was. In the end, a wasted opportunity, a wasted platform, a wasted chance to have a meaningful conversation about real issues. All of it sacrificed on the altar of ego and misplaced rage. And now, instead of discussing the substance of Harry's concerns, the world would be talking about his meltdown. Instead of examining the real problems he wanted to highlight, the headlines would be about his personal attack on a respected journalist. Anderson knew how these things went. He'd been in the business long enough. By morning, the story would be everywhere. The takes would be hot. The opinions would be fierce. People would choose sides. Some would defend Harry, claiming he was justified in his anger. Others would condemn him for his behavior. Very few would focus on what the interview was supposed to be about in the first place. He thought about the young production assistant's question, "Why did you keep trying?" And he realized the answer was simpler than he'd made it. Hope. He kept trying because he hoped for better. He hoped that reason would prevail. He hoped that common ground could be found. He hoped that even in the midst of anger and pain, two people could still communicate with basic respect. But hope isn't always enough. Sometimes the wounds are too deep. Sometimes the anger is too consuming. Sometimes people are so convinced they're right that they can't hear anything else. And when that happens, when dialogue becomes impossible, the kindest thing you can do is walk away. Or in this case, ask someone else to walk away. The studio door opened and the senior producer poked her head in. "Legal says we're clear to air. They've reviewed the footage, and they don't see any liability issues. If anything, they think keeping it under wraps would be worse. Make it look like we have something to hide." Anderson nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow night, regular time slot. We'll promote it this evening." Anderson Cooper addresses the Prince Harry interview that ended abruptly. Or something like that. Publicity is working on the exact language. "No," Anderson said firmly. "We don't tease it. We don't sensationalize it. We simply announce that we'll be airing footage from tonight's interview and providing context. That's it. No dramatic music. No shocking revelations. We present it with dignity." The producer nodded. "I'll let them know." She hesitated. "Anderson?" For what it's worth, you handled that perfectly. You were professional, patient, and firm when you needed to be. No one watching that tape could say you did anything wrong." "Thank you," Anderson said. "But there will still be people who say I did everything wrong. That's the nature of the world we live in. Everyone sees what they want to see. Then we show them what actually happened and trust that truth matters." Anderson smiled slightly. "Ever the optimist." "Someone has to be," she replied with a small grin, then left him alone again. Anderson sat there a while longer in the quiet studio, thinking about truth and perception, about anger and pain, about the responsibilities of journalism and the limitations of human communication. He thought about all the successful interviews he'd conducted, all the times difficult conversations had led to understanding, and he thought about tonight and what it represented. In the end, he stood up, straightened his tie, and walked toward the exit. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The footage would air, the reactions would pour in. The story would take on a life of its own, but tonight, his job was done. He'd conducted himself with integrity. He'd protected his platform. He'd drawn a line that needed to be drawn. And sometimes, that's all you can do. Show up, do your best, and when someone crosses a line you can't tolerate, have the courage to say so. The lights in the studio clicked off one by one as the crew finished closing down for the night. And in the darkness, the empty chairs sat facing each other, silent witnesses to a conversation that fell apart, an opportunity lost, and a moment that would be remembered not for what was said, but for what couldn't be said once respect had left the room.